So besides being a therapist and everything else that Linda just mentioned, I'm the executive director of the organization, and I have been with the organization now for nearly 17, 18 years, so it's been a while. But Samaritan is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1970, so we have been around for quite a while. We were founded at the First Congregational United Church of Christ in Appleton with the intention to be a clinic, a mental health provider clinic that really had that intentionality in bringing the spirituality into the process, both to support faith leaders in the area for their own needs, but also to support the faith communities that when they were looking for services, that was ignored or sometimes even pushed aside because in that time, anything religious, spiritual, whatever was seen as pathological. Now we are in a much different scenario. Now the recognition, the acknowledgement that we are all many parts together, as Dan brought this morning, that is the common knowledge. So not to address the spiritual dimension of a client is bad practice now. So we all need to do. So we were ahead of our times already. So very fast timeline. We were launched in 1970 with that name. Then in 74 we were incorporated and took a different name. And then in 2006 we changed to Samaritan Counseling Center. And just an interesting fact, when we were called Pastoral Counseling Center was when I started as an intern. And you know what interns do? Everything, right? And one of the things that I did was to be at the front desk, and I had several times when people would call for services, and I remember two very clear ones. Someone saying, listen, I'm not a pastor, can I get services there? Yes. And another person saying, I'm not necessarily religious, and I really would like to get services there, can I? And I remember a third call, which was, do we have any counselors who are not pastors? And we did. So that name actually led to some misconstrued understanding of who we are. So then, because we were affiliated with the Samaritan Network since 1991, we then, in 2006, when we changed the address, we rebranded to Samaritan Counseling Center. But then, throughout the years, and specifically since 2012, we have had another program besides counseling, and I'm going to show you very briefly. So we are not only counseling providers. So we decided to change our brand identity to just be Samaritan, healing mind, body, and spirit. And that coincided with a brand new building and a brand study, and we actually found that people like the name Samaritan because even non-religious people understand that Samaritans are compassionate and get out of their way to help. So people would tell us, don't drop the name, don't lose your identity. So we remained Samaritan. Oh, just a quick, this was when we opened our new facility. That was our staff then, and hello from our staff. And currently we are nearly 40 staff members with 2 interns and several qualified treatment trainees, which are resident counselors. And then a whole bunch of the people you see in this picture are with the screening program that work in the schools and some admin staff. Our theme for this year is letting our light shine, and I hope as we go through this, you think about how you can take that message for yourself, in your inner light, to be a beacon of hope for people in the community of Marshfield.
This is covered up.
What she says. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'll interrupt you just a minute, Rosangela. Does anyone else know more about this than I do as far as how to get that to go away?
One more and see what that.
All right, we'll try. I don't, well, it might be under view, but.
Is it the captions maybe?
No, we have that turned on, but it's,
think you just said and will still go.
No, that'll close, that will end the
That will
meeting.
close the meeting.
That's not what I want. Let's see.
I think you, like you said, might be something.
Yeah. Now I don't even know how to get
We
on.
can't just sort of move the whole thing up, right? So
No,
we above that?
and you can't even get out of this panel now. So,
Now, did you get rid of the capsules?
I don't think I want to get rid of the captions. I can.
Just go
enter
all
it,
the way
but-
down.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's what we
We
do.
want
Maybe try caption, let's
captions,
see.
maybe that'll.
Maybe the caption goes on the screen a little above.
Uh-huh.
English is a good word.
Yeah.
Okay. This,
I
I don't use this remote all that.
Oh,
There
so
we
the
go.
caption goes up there. Better, thank you, that helps. Okay. So why we do what we do? Why we have been in this business for over 50 years and why it's so important now? And I think many of you may have already heard some of those statistics, but this is very recent. That is 2023 report from the Mental Health America organization. And a few things that really caught my attention for the folks on the. I'm not going to do this because for the folks on this, from the folk home, they won't see me. But anyhow, we went from 19.8% of adults experiencing mental illness on any day to 21%. So it's increased from last year, which was already bad, right? Which is then 1 in every 5 people. So just thinking about this, how many we are here? About 25 people. So at least 5 of us per that, at least 5 of us would experience a mental health difficult day. I'll say I am one of them. So perhaps we have a few others, or perhaps we have more than 1 in 5 in this room, right? And the other thing that has increased is the number of adults with a mental illness who have not been able to receive treatment due to cost. That has increased too, from 24.7 to 28%. And that many cases is because people have health insurance, but their co-pays went up so much that people cannot afford that, and then they choose not, or deductibles, and then they choose not to get care. And the other number that is disheartening is that youth who have a private insurance but do not have coverage for mental health care, it went from 8% to 10%. So 1 in every 10 kids do not have mental health benefits in their health insurance. That is hard. And we certainly are seeing all of that because Samaritan serves many, many people who either are on a public insurance or people who have insurances with high deductibles and then they need some sort of payment plan and assistance, or people who need just a sliding fee scale a way of paying so that they can get their services. So like that, 1 in every 5 people, 5 adults have a mental health condition, 1 in every 6 kids between ages 6 and 17 experience a mental health disorder every year. They're going to grow to be people who are going to struggle, right? Another disheartening thing that the research shows is that 50% of all lifetime mental health conditions, diagnosable mental illness, begin by age 14, 50%. And by the time individuals are 24, right, 75% of all the mental health conditions have the onset around that age. I lost a sister-in-law to suicide, and that was about the age when we saw her mental illness start. And her condition took her just a couple years ago when she was nearing 50 years old. So she lived more than half of her life struggling with that. That's why we do what we do. And that's why it's so important what you are doing here, caring, wanting to know more, wanting to make a difference with that. I see you are chapter 20, Matthew 25 church, and we talk about poverty, we talk about structural racism, we talk about all that kind of stuff. And infused in all of that, there's mental health problems because it comes in tight connection with it, right? So what we do, we have mental health counseling, so our clinics, services, providing mental health and substance abuse care. We do wellness screen assessments in school districts to catch students who are already struggling and may need help and have not accessed yet. And we work with communities at large, but particularly faith communities, to help them be better prepared to address mental health issues in their context, but also to be stronger systems of support. Everything we do from that spiritual integrated care, meaning that even the bookkeeper, right? We try to help them connect with that sacred within them so they keep strong internally to do the work, to support the services, to support our operations, and ultimately to support our clients. And everything we do, it's funded on a mix of fees for services, grants, and donations. So again, that's hard to read, so don't worry too much about this, but that statement, when I mentioned that oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? The theme for the year is letting our light shine. It's because we know that when we do that for ourselves, we can shine hope into other people's lives. And we have a strong commitment to celebrate the internal light of every person without discriminating against any aspect of a person's life. We respect, we value, and affirm the sacred dignity of each person. Very much like what I have been seeing and all the stuff that I read about your church too. Through that, this gives a quick glance at our footprint. The red blocks show where we have the school-based screening program. The blue blocks show where we have clinical services. So we have community services in New London, Kokona, and Oshkosh, our main office in Menasha, and in Calumet County, it's just the school-based counseling. But if I had brought in a picture of zip codes of our clients, we would have to have a much smaller map of Wisconsin to show how much bigger the reach is, because telehealth has been allowing us to extend our reach. And that gives you a sense, again, the closed captioning is there, is not allowing us to see, but the bars that you see there, and if I invite you to just look at the green bars, those show the number of clients per year. So from 2019 through this year, 2022, we had a record number of clients in counseling. And in 2023, just through the end of April, we are at over 1,200 clients. If we go on that pace, we will be way over 2,000 clients in care through the year, which is a significant growth for us. The school-based screening program, it's a 10-minute computer-based questionnaire that the students answer, and then after the results are gathered, we identify students who are struggling already. And then we do a follow-up interview, and from that follow-up interview, we make determination if we need to refer them for care. And then we reach to the parents and talk to the parents and help them navigate the complicated systems of care to connect them to a provider for further evaluation. You see there through the past 4 years through the pandemic, right? 2020 and 21 was a very abnormal year for everybody, but then you see that number increasing. And in 2022, 2023, we referred for care almost as many kids as we referred for care in the previous school year, but the number of positive screens were lower. So there were more kids in need of care, even though they screened positive. That is putting a lot of burden on our staff So 46% of all the students who were identified in need for care had to be referred. So every research, every survey, every data point that says that our kids are struggling, and I know that we have Dr. Mike Schulen and the audience there. I think he would have a lot to say about that too, right? And our clergy congregation care, there are services to faith communities. We continue to see faith leaders and faith communities struggling because things have not gone back to how they used to be pre-March 2020, and many ministers are really struggling. And so I really give you a word of praise for this time that your pastor is on sabbatical. This is rejuvenating, it's important. And I think, that's a great thing that churches do, allowing this time for recharge. I wish I could have that, and many other care providers could have that too, right? Part of the services we do for faith communities then is mental health training, coaching, support groups, and pulpit supply like I did today. And we have some new ideas coming up for next year. So that's just a quick picture of where we are now. And I left some brochures outside. If you would like to just check us out on the website, you feel free to do. How we do that? We do that, as I mentioned, by connecting mind, body, and the spirit so individuals, families, and communities thrive. The mind part is our cognition, all that we think. When people say, "Now that's all in your head," it's true. It's all in your head. And that's why it's bad. Because sometimes all that's in our head is making us very sick, right? And then when we are able to change how we think, reframe our thoughts, and understand our thoughts, reframe our thoughts, infuse it with our belief systems and a sense of purpose and a sense of not being alone because there's a higher power that's with us, that begins to strengthen the mind. And then we pay attention to what the body is signaling us. Sometimes it's hard to breathe. Sometimes our heart is beating so fast. We bring this all together. And then we work with that. And what we generate in the middle is hope. That's how we do it. And it's inclusive to any faith tradition or no faith tradition whatsoever, as long as the person has a little kernel of something sacred within themselves. And we help them figure out what that is. So now we're going to talking about the power of spirituality in mental wellness. And the first thing is try to just glance at the differences between spirituality, faith, and religion, right? Some people understand that to be all the same. Some people are very firm affirmers that no, it's not. I can completely be a spiritual person and not like religion and church whatsoever. That's true. When I was young, there was a book that was like a study on the book of Romans, and the title was How to Be, oh my gosh, something, it's a translation in my mind. So how to be spiritual without being religious. Because what religion offers us is a set of moral standards, practices. It's a collective experience, right? And their rituals, their practices. Some religions are very specific in dictating what is right and wrong, the dogmas, the doctrines, and everything. I'm not saying they're bad, right? It's been around for centuries, right? It's a great value because the human mind, the human beings, they yearn for that spiritual connection. So religions throughout the eons have been formed to provide that base. But if that's all a person has, some things might be missing, right? Because questions such as, where do I find meaning for my life? How do I feel connected? How should I live? You can have the dogmas and doctrines of the churches, of the organized religions, and people may still be a bit at loss with that, right? So spirituality is more about that connection with something that's bigger than oneself. That can be realized within a church, right, or a faith tradition, but sometimes it doesn't need to be. That connection with something that transcends a person, a being, right? The world does not revolve around me. I'm here because I'm a part of something much bigger. And that gives me hope, that gives me purpose in life. And spirituality is a universal and innate thing, right? And when we find a way to plug that in, right, it can be on a faith tradition, it can be on a religion, or it can be in a group that brings that sense, it really helps people, right? Because what we look for is that sense of meaning, is that sense of belonging and connection, is that sense of establishing some base of belief and traditions that begins to give us a sense of knowing. Remember when I talk about not knowing being a great source of anxiety? So when those things are in place, it soothes us, a person, soothes our soul, right? Well, where's faith in all of that? Well, faith brings all of that together and goes beyond, because faith is seeing light with your heart when all your eyes see is darkness, according to Barbara Johnson. So faith is what gives us hope, right? And we are in a very privileged position because of our belonging to a faith community or being connected to a faith community. That comes a bit more easy for some of us. But unfortunately, there are many people who are not in faith communities nowadays because they were very deeply wounded by many of the beliefs or by the human constructs that have nothing to do with what God wants, with what is the actual core that brings people around a certain set of doctrines and beliefs, right? So let's look at that sacred core and that sacred journey and how people experience that. There's a quote on the screen, right? That's Durkheim. He wrote this in a piece written in 1915, but to me this is so contemporary, right? He was writing about the elementary forms of the religious life, so long ago, that still applies. Sacred things, one must not understand simply those personal beings, which are called gods or spirits. For some people, a rock, a tree, a spring, a pebble, a piece of wood, a house in a world, anything can be sacred as long as it provides that grounding piece. I have talked this kind of stuff with some people who were very Christian based, and I really ruffled some feathers. Really ruffled some feathers, right? But I want to say this to all of you. I don't think any of this contradicts anything that I believe as a Christian and as a Presbyterian, right? To understand that what that tells me is one of the things that is in the Psalms. You know, nature proclaims God's presence, give witness to God's glory, right? And when we pay attention to this, we open up that sacred channel to that higher power, and then opens the opportunity, much more the opportunity for God and the Holy Spirit to reach a person. So when people, some more, I would say a little more, I'll use the word, a bit more conservative approach to Christianity, they challenge that. I have said to someone, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to go and preach to someone who is already so wounded that they're not going to listen anything? Or do you prefer, and probably are thinking about taking their lives because they're at that point of hopelessness? Or would you prefer to just lean in with them and find what is sacred for them and use that to keep them alive so that the Holy Spirit can reach, and then we can preach the gospel through that kind of love and care, right? Instead of just saying, oh, you're going to hell because you believe this or that. If you kill yourself, you're going to hell. Has anybody ever heard that kind of stuff? Right? So what kind of gospel are we preaching? Not the one that Jesus gave us, not the one I believe, right? But if we preach love and if we listen and if we find what gives that person a sense of purpose and a sense that they belong in this life, there's something much bigger, then that connection can happen, right? But Dr. Kenneth Parkman, in talking about that sacred core and how we can hook that, he says that for many people, there's lots of things there, right? For the religious people is mostly God and the divine and that transcendent reality. For people who are not attached to a religious tradition, either because they never were or because that was broken, we could find that in when people appreciate beauty, nature, when in parenting a child, right? Or in friendships, or how they manage their time in art. There's so many ways. So it's a matter of sitting with people and listening. And that is especially effective because sitting with someone and listening begins to develop that sense of connection and belonging that is crucial. And that faith communities intrinsically bring in, it's a community. So if people can belong in a community, that is already very healing, right? But people who don't feel they belong there, where they're going to attach to, what they're going to attach to, right? How do people experience their spiritual and sacred journey and how that impacts their mental well-being? So remember that circle and the different ways of connecting or finding the sacred? People can do this, as I said, just a little visual of what I was saying before. I have met with people who said, I had a client once, very religious, very Christian based, and I asked her, okay, she was extremely anxious, and I asked her, where do you find God? Is it in church? Is it in prayer? And she thought for a while, went home and thought for a little longer, and then she came back with a picture the next session. And it was a picture of, I don't remember if it was a lake or a river, but it was at a church camp. And she said, when things are really, really bad, I go there and I sit by the water where I took this picture. There's no way for me to be there and not feel God with me. So when she finished her treatment, she gave me a mug with that picture that I have to this day, right? It wasn't in church. It was in nature. But that's how she reached out to God and she felt God reaching back to her. It's talking to someone. It's walking. It's on a personal journey. I was driving here this morning. There was praying going on. I was driving here, right? For many people, it's writing the Bible. Reading the Bible, not writing the Bible. That would be heretic, right? They'd be writing in the Bible as you read. So then, again, ways of identifying, so you can ask some questions. What are your ways of knowing? It's thinking. For some people, it's very intellectual. For other people, it's behavioral, right? For people, some people is reading. For some people, is walking, taking care of others, relating. It's in the exchange of relationships where they connect with the sacred. And then more than acting is that experiencing, right? And it's deeply personal. So as I mentioned about David's Psalms today, after I did some studying and began to experience that, there's no way I can read the Psalms and not get there. There's some occasions when I'm reading the Psalms and I kind of see David like yelling at God, like, God, I look at the mountains and for goodness gracious, where are you? How long do I have to wait? Right? It's almost like he's bantering with God. And then you keep reading the Psalm and say, God, goodness, No, at the end he goes, I will trust you, Lord, in your own time. If you can go to some of the Psalms, and I wish I had a list of them, I'm sorry. And you're going to see that movement. You go, you banter, and then you experience the relief because you release that. In a way, it's like a kid coming home, tired, hungry, right? But you know, hunger, right? Have you ever experienced that? That's why I got some food here because I didn't want to go there. And all you need to do is that time of release and then, yes, sir.
I would share with you a very personal thing for me about the Psalms. When I was in seminary, I was served as a pastor for a small church in Pittsburgh. And we came in, I obviously got a name of the names of the people who were needed to be called on. And we had a lady that was in intensive care in a coma and was not expected to live long. And so that was one of my first calls, and I knew that hearing is one of the last things that goes. And so I was reading Psalms, and I was going through the 121st Psalm, and as I started going through it, she was repeating it with me,
Oh, wow.
coming out of this. And when we finished, we said a prayer, there was a deep sigh, and she passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
It was one of the most best experience of my life. I mean, it was just, and coming away from that death is so frightening. And in this sense, it was just beautiful and peaceful. She was home where she needed to be.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for sharing that. So isn't this amazing? Right? What can we do for people that are at that point in their lives that seem like nothing can be done for them? It's a person in coma, but they were not gone yet. And what you did, you related. You brought that connection, and it reached to a part of her mind that everybody thought was gone, but it wasn't. And the soul was there right along with it, right? And there's several other opportunities when we think someone is too way far gone for us to reach out to them, right? Out there in the world, completely lost souls or whatever, and someone reaches to them and say, I was thinking of you. You may never know what that clicks, how that clicks, right? But that care, that gives people that sense that they are important and they belong in this life, and that someone cares enough that there's a connection and it sparks something. So each one of you can do something for that and make a big impact. So if you're already thinking, how are we going to wrap this up in terms of what can I do as a member of this church to make any difference, that's a big cue already, okay? A big clue. So if you don't know, in the counseling program, this list of questions is one that we offer our counselors to begin to figure out. There's a question in our client questionnaire that says, do you belong to a faith community? And sometimes the answer is a big N-O, right? I have had clients who said, if you ever talk about God with me, I will walk out and you'll never see me again. Fine, totally fine. That was a teenager who had been hospitalized with psychotic symptoms, and he couldn't sleep and nothing, and he was suicidal. And okay, we don't talk about God, right? And every time I say this, I don't know how many of you have watched the movie Encanto. We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about God. But he's around there listening to us, and he was always right, so I spoiled the movie for you. Yeah, that's it. We may not talk about God. We may not want to hear what he has to say to us, but God is always around, right? And when we care to listen, it works. So a few things that I did with that kid was to just ask some questions like that. And that one was, or variation of that was what brought up something different for that kid. What brings you strength or courage to go on? Why do you think it's important for you to be alive? If you are alive, what difference it's going to make? And then he started talking about the difference that could make. And I asked him, where you got that from? I don't think you're going to guess where he got that from. A rapper, a singer. I don't remember the name of the rapper anymore, but it was the bizarrest thing when my husband asked me, why the heck are you listening to rap songs? I was doing homework, right? And the kind of homework we do, right, Mike? And oh my goodness, I actually printed out some of the lyrics. And you know what? That was gospel. And that singer was a prophet. And we got to some points that I say, okay, what sustains you when you are in trouble? And he would quote some songs. And then when things were going on in the work with him, I said, okay, what would that rapper say about that thought? Ooh, yeah, that doesn't go. Guess what? As far as I know, the kid lives, right? So that was spiritual and that was sacred. And that kid is alive and it's up to God to reach him from there on, right? So there's a big, strong intersection between a person's sacred journey and the mental well-being. And here's what I have been hinting at or clearly saying from the beginning. Unless religion is leading to a deeper spiritual experience, it is likely not enhancing mental health. It's possible to be religious without being spiritual. But it's not possible to be spiritual, truly spiritual, without enhancing one's mental health. Right? Religion, if it's just going through the motions and doesn't connect to that sacred core, it's just going through the motions. Going to church every Sunday and just going through the motions may do more damage to one's person's mental health, right, than good. Example, if what we are hearing in a faith community is that if you behave this or that way, you're going to hell, how good is that doing? You are not welcome here because you practice this or that, right? You're part of the LGBTQ community. Do you know that that's against God's will and you're going to hell unless you change that? Isn't that what we hear in many faith communities? How is that bringing people to Jesus or bringing Jesus to people? So I am very grateful to see what the Presbyterian Church has been doing in terms of the Matthew 25 ministry and being more affirming and welcoming and open so that people can come and we can be God to them. We can be Jesus to everyone, right?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Back to that other slide, it cites Andrea Matthews. I'm always fascinated how a publication like Psychology Today defines deeper spiritual experience. I want to look up the article and see what that is, but do you recall how she defined
Well, most of what I said is in line with what she says.
connection, transcendence,
Connection, transcendence.
sense of larger
Mhm.
than yourself?
Yes, and that piece that the religiosity that actually is more constraining. Yeah, so I can share this PowerPoint with you all,
If you want.
and then you can click on that article and go straight to it. Okay, there's some live links there, and of course, Dr. Mike could also help, right, Mike? I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
I do have a comment. First is I greatly appreciate your wisdom and your experience and this ministry, this calling you have for what you're doing. And it just glows from you. It's your light. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Second, one of the ways I understand the difference between religion and spirituality is the origins focus. I tend to find religion's origin focus is about original sin. Not all religion, but many. And a sacredness, its origin is about the sacred core.
Yes.
And in therapy, you're creating a sacred space that honors the sacred core first before you look at any of the flaws. And taking the time to learn the lyrics to a rap song as a way of looking at how does this person understand the world and how they work with it is so valuing its dignity. It's speaking to their sacred core.
That is great. Thank you, Mike, for saying that, because that's exactly it, right? So I mentioned Genesis 3 this morning, right? We are so hung up on the fallen, our condition as fallen people, that we forget that we were not created fallen. We were created in God's image. That's our first condition, right? Now, of course, the Presbyterian tradition, Calvin and everything, it says that once the first humans have fallen, everybody's fallen, right? But the point is that we have fallen from something, and the return to that something should be more important, right? So appreciate what you say, Mike, to recognize God in each creature, right? And to focus on that and to trust that we can always connect back with that. And yes, we can always get better from our falls through life, right? So there's a list of other quotes there that I'll go through, and I don't think we need to dwell too much into them, but as I said, I will share the PowerPoint with you all, right? I want to dwell a little more into what we can offer as a faith community, right? I'll just go over that. Why should we care? Why should we care? We care because we have a sacred mandate to do this. We have a sacred mandate to care for everyone, care for humanity, care for nature, right? To go into the world and preach the gospel. It's a sacred mandate, right? And we forget that. And even within churches, many people are struggling with mental health conditions. And there are many people who are not with us in church because they just don't have the wherewithal to even go to church. As I mentioned in the sermon, that sometimes we forgot that God loves us in spite of anything, right? And we go away from God, or we go into that dark spot and we become detached from the church, right? Dr. Susan or Reverend Susan Greg Schrader in this ministry, this is another one that's good to look into. I don't think that's a live link, but mental illness affects all aspects, including the spiritual well-being, right? So that's what I mentioned during the worship. And I want to go there. When I found this quote from Henry Nowen, it really opened my eyes in a different way. And I know everybody can read, but I'll read this all out, okay? Hospitality means primarily the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. It's not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom, not disturbed by dividing lines. The paradox of hospitality is that it wants to create emptiness, not a fearful emptiness, but a friendly emptiness where strangers can enter and discover themselves as created free. Free to sing their own songs, speak their own languages, dance their own dances, free also to live and follow their own vocations. Hospitality is not a subtle invitation to adore the lifestyle of the host, but the gift of a chance for the guest to find his own. In other words, we have passages in the Bible, right? The truth will set you free. I am the truth, I'm the way, I'm the life, right? Even if we hold that trust that, Jesus is the truth and this is the way, if we come with that to impose this on someone, we're not going to create that space where people want to enter and discover it. Now, there's a risk with that. Because creating that kind of hospitable space where the other can come in and be changed means that we are also opening ourselves to to a change too. And what will come out of it, only God knows. But it's that mutual change, that exchange that happens in community, in that sense of connection and belonging, that transforms everybody and creates something that's much bigger. It's that transcendent piece, right? I'm so happy that our tradition, the Presbyterian tradition, creates that, and that people like you are open to create that empty space here and invite me to talk about this so that we all can change through this experience and learn together. And as we leave this space today and we talk to people through the week, we're going to be doing some things different this week because we learned some things different. We were transformed by this already a little bit, right? And how will that continue to nurture what we do here in this faith community and create what is called by, in that ministry, Dr. Schrader, right? Which is called the caring congregation. And to create that caring congregation, the program that she develops, and you can look into it, really brings all these 5 pieces together. It starts with education, starts by learning. And that's what you have been doing when you brought people from NAMI to talk to you, when you invited me to come here, right? And then none of this, you see there's no arrows in a directional sense because those things can happen all together and one after the other or one and the other, right? But advocacy, speaking on behalf, speaking in favor, right? Of people who need this kind of care because of mental health distress, is offering support, is being welcomed, right? And then eventually making a larger commitment as a community or individually just here, right now, each one of us making a commitment to be open and open to listen and to be present and to explore our own sacred within the Presbyterian tradition, but within our own sacred, how we connect with the higher, the transcendent, so that we can make that connection and that hospitable space really inviting and welcoming to all. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The question here is if we know of any providers in the area here that does the spiritual integrated therapy.
The premise for this is 40 years ago when I started training, there was actually a controversy in the field of psychology about whether psychology was value-free. And I remember as a student thinking, what a stupid idea. And so from that, I think a well-trained therapist is going to respectfully explore a person's sacred core. What are their beliefs, and how mindful the individual is of their beliefs and how that relates to why they've come in, and then we'll engage and support that. But the therapist, whether they take the lead or incorporate their spirituality or reference to religion, then at a public institution, for example, like the Marshfield Clinic, the therapist has to be very, very careful.
Yeah. So for about 11 years, we provided counseling services for the students of the Fox Valley UW campus. It's a 2-year college. And for 11 years, we had the contract and we provided the counseling services there. And during a good chunk of that time, I started as the first provider there and then became clinical director and then became the executive director. And the counselors would say, but how do we do this spiritual integrated care at the State University? I said, you do it like anywhere else. because it's our responsibilities as providers to be fully equipped to treat all dimensions of a person. Yeah, but yeah, there's too many people out there that wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And a big piece of it is that if that is not something that is well resolved for themselves individually, I always say this to our counselors. If you're not secure on your own sacred ground, you're not going to feel comfortable entering the sacred ground of the other person, right? Because it can be extremely different than yours. For some people can be like seducing, I would say, if some people are more rigid with their religious tradition, right? We have had counselors over the years who came as trainees or fully licensed, and they said, this place is too religious for me. Or there were people who came and said, this place is not religious at all. This is not faith-based work. No, it's spiritually integrated work, right? You cannot talk to people about your faith, your personal faith, right? This is not the place to evangelize. This is what I tell people. This is not the place to evangelize. I had a client once, and I had an intern with me, and that intern was a former pastor. And the client came with the spouse for couples therapy. And at the end of the session, the wife, judgment-free, I'll go there. I wasn't. The super righteous woman said, could we end this session with a prayer? Right? And I looked at the intern, and the intern was always starting to pose as the pastor in the room, right? To do the prayer. And at that point, I knew already they were from a Lutheran tradition, ELCA. So I went into my little Rolodex, all I knew of and then I was remembering what I had heard through the session, and I was like, let's put the religion out here, and let's go for what is the sacred piece. And instead of saying, yes, let me pray or let the intern pray, I turn back to the couple and I say, we can totally pray at the end of the session, but can you pray? Because I want to see how is your relationship with God. And then after that, we can go from there. And by golly, that was not a Lutheran prayer as far as I could tell. Right? But it opened a space completely different. And then I learned that the husband didn't believe like that. They were not on the same sacred ground. And that was quite diagnostic at that time, right? I can ramble a lot.
Share one more from seminary that one of my professors was in Europe during the Second World War. And after it was over, the church in Germany grew tremendously, and the other churches really were rather struggling. And when they asked the German church why they were doing so good, they said, well, we never try to talk religion. We service their needs, and when they say, well, why do you do this? We can tell them exactly why. And it really made a difference in the growth of the church.
That is a perfect segue for us to begin to wrap up here. That is a perfect, thank you for that gift that he handed me on a platter. Right? Many people in my own church, when I use the word evangelism, it's almost like I can see the hair going up and back there. Ooh, right, evangelism. We had a ministry, a committee of evangelism, and that was changed to outreach. And then from outreach, it changed, I don't even know what it's called anymore, right? And then the other day, one of the members of one of those that committee, he had a T-shirt. Preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. Right? And then our church is a Matthew 25 church now. And then that's it. What are the needs of the community around you? And I know that you moved from a downtown building that could not accommodate the needs of the people anymore, right? But it's not only about physical needs, it's about all the needs. So physically, you may not be close to where the needs are, right? But how you get yourself close to where the needs are and how you are Jesus to people, right? How you play it. People would sit together and eat together in Jesus' time or after Jesus during the apostles' time. They would care for the sick. They would care for the widows. They would cry with the ones who were hurting, right? They would try to help the people who were sick. And then they would be together and they would learn together. And the Holy Spirit was bringing people to the faith in droves, right? It's about how you can be Jesus, how you can live the gospel on a daily basis. And then when people ask you, why are you doing this? Right?
The Bible is so full of paradox, but it's so paradoxical that each person's spirituality journey is their own, but yet you have to have the connection of somebody sitting or listening. You can't achieve it on your own.
Yes. Yes. There's so many people that say, I don't need the church. I can have my own relationship with God. And that's fine and dandy. But nobody can really grow that in isolation. And through the pandemic, we saw that. That was super clear. One of the determinants of health is connection. Isolation and loneliness is worse than smoking and obesity for a person's health, right? And what faith communities provide a lot is exactly that. As long as we can do it with that sense of hospitality and openness and welcoming, right? That we read from the quote from Henry Nolan, right? Because if not, if that's the little club that we only let in people who think like us, behave like us, pray like us, sing like us, dress like us, then churches will die. Yeah. I think I saw a hand. Yes.
I've just been thinking about this a lot personally, your stats about people with anxiety and everything. I mean, I think all of us could say that we see it everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everybody knows many people that are dealing with that, and it's just debilitating, really, right? So specifically, I have a heart for young adults, which I think you meant was a high statistic of people that are struggling right now. And so for months, I've really had something on my heart, and really the thought behind it has changed the conversation. And for me, it's been working itself out, and I can only make a difference with the people that I have, right? So not everybody can go to a counseling service. There aren't enough of you guys, right?
Yes.
So part of what I'm hearing today is not only supporting what you do, but also a call to each of us to say how
Yes.
in our communities can we begin to understand what you're saying, open a welcoming place to say intentionally, we're going to create community and networks with each other. This is just an idea because it's the only way I could do it, but I'm starting a Zoom session coming up with, I invited 30 women that I know and their daughters, and 19 of them are going to come. And I think everybody has their own way of connecting, but I think I found a simple way to start. And I thought, I don't know what God will do with it or where it'll go, but it was an intentional say, I want to be in relationship with you. And most people, that's where it starts, right? They need relationship and community. And people knowing that they care and that they want to know who you are. So I'm nervous about what I'm doing because this is way outside my thing, but I just feel like I'm saying each of us, like, we all have people and not everybody can go to a counseling center. There's not enough. So how are we being led by what God's saying to open up and reach out?
Yeah.
And the other part of the tension inside me that I think God is working on, I think it's beautiful what you said about opening up, getting to the sacred, really touching that with people. In Matthew 25, absolutely, we're called to love and serve people. The part for me that is tricky and interesting, and maybe you have insights, is how also to share Jesus. Because the thought in my head is, if we're Matthew 25 people all day long, and we never get to a point where they ask, have they ever heard about Jesus? And if we're just serving everybody and never saying Jesus, then we've been like short-sighted in our ministry because they don't know the one that actually restores.
Yes.
So I don't have it worked out, but that's like where it sits with me. Like, I don't want to forcefully, Jesus, 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 right? Like, not that at all, but not go away without saying, wow, to me, Jesus is the ultimate restoration of all of it. So trying to work out being Matthew 25 and letting him be known. My voice is shaking to some of my audience. But I'm really like, I feel like God's calling us so directly to this.
Yes.
Not just
Yes.
not just a counseling service.
Part of that,
I mean, I don't mean that to minimize your
No,
service, it's immensely important.
but part of that too is letting go of the time.
Absolutely.
It's you.
Oh, for sure. And
And when they
would
see
believe
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's.
But I want to be quiet enough to listen. So when he says,
You've got it.
let me be known, I want to let him be known also and not be afraid of saying that part of, because to me, he's the one that created all the restoration in the first place. So without him, we can be serving and do beautiful things. But wow, he's the ultimate restorer. So it's a tricky place.
It is
I don't
very
have it worked
tricky.
out.
It's very tricky.
So I liked your idea of talking initially about sacred, like how do you relate, how do you attach, what's meaningful, what draws you in. I think that's a great beginning, and I wrote notes about that because I think it'll be helpful to engage. But then for me, it's kind of working through that relationship, listening to God, and at the right timing, there's more, right?
And what I would suggest that we go out here with thinking today, so all of this, right? Thinking about the other, but perhaps it's that internal. What is our relationship with God looking like, right? Can we truly tell someone, like, oh my gosh, your life is so hard. How can you keep going on like that? Because I'm not alone. What do you mean? You know, for me, Jesus is always with me. God has given Jesus to me. That is blah, blah, blah. For me, this is a very strong experience and makes difference. If one of these days you want to listen about that, you want to hear about that, I can tell you about it, right? When we speak from personal experience, when that's really true for us, right, the person will listen. I remember in college, I went through a difficult phase and I went away from church. I was going to church every Sunday, people. Right? You heard my story over there, right? There was no way I was not going to go to church. That was not going to fly with my mom and dad and grandparents and everybody. But that was not my primary focus. And I truly feel like there was a time when God said, I'm putting on, this is my interpretation. This that I do today is my call. God called me to do this, right? And it was like almost like God saying, I'm not going to let you go on that path. I was a licensed psychologist back in Brazil, so I relate to what you said, Mike, right? And I was going there. You separate your faith. So I was Christian on Sunday, and the rest of the week I was going to be a psychologist. And then it was like God pulled me aside and said, Dad, you know that's not how it works. Right? And then when I came back to Jesus, right? I had that come to Jesus conversation. And something's happened in my life. And I went away for like a spring break or something. When I came back, I didn't say anything. People came to me and said, there's something different about you. I don't know what it is. And there were a few people asking me that. Then I said, I gotta begin to say it. And then I began to talk about it. And some people went away because of that. And some people would just cock their heads. And I don't know what the Spirit did to their lives later on. But I spoke my piece, right? I'm at peace because I'm not alone. Jesus is with me, and I know that what I'm doing is a mission that He has given me. And if you want to learn about that part of my life, I'll be glad to talk. And that was what happened 36 years ago in my life, right? And sometimes it happens, but it's important because if we are just the social justice, the radical, I forgot. If we are just the social services of Matthew 25, we could let United Way do the work. We could let, any other social groups do the work. It's how we connect that with the spiritual piece. All right, I'm way over time.
No, this is great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks to our friends in the audience. Thank you.
Bye-bye.